Thanks for joining us today. So this session is really a lot about adaptive sports. And so we've got 4 really good speakers for you. Not in the order in your program, sorry about that. But the order is going to make sense, you'll see, as we go through it. So the first speaker today is Dr. Madeline Czeck, who's a postdoctoral fellow in the Rehabilitation and Engineering Center for Optimizing Veteran Engagement and Reintegration, Recover, which is at the Minneapolis VA healthcare system. And her research focuses on understanding goals and motives, increasing access, and decreasing barriers to participation and engagement in sport and physical activity. All right, take it away.
Sounds good. Thank you for the introduction, Dr. Hansen. So my name is Dr. Madeline Czeck, and the title of my presentation is Adaptive Sport is Meaningful, Current Literature on the Impact of Adaptive Sport on Well-Being. First, I have no financial disclosures, and the topics discussed are my personal interpretations and do not necessarily reflect that of the Department of Veterans Affairs or the U.S. government. I'm an exercise physiologist, and I earned my master's degree and my doctorate degree in kinesiology from the University of Minnesota. Throughout my graduate career, I was able to participate in research that focused on exercise, metabolism, and cardiovascular health. These 3 concepts are intertwined when looking at an individual's physical health and has laid the groundwork for my future research interests. Wanting to further my research training, I joined the Rehabilitation and Engineering Center for Optimizing Veteran Engagement and Reintegration, or Recover, as a postdoctoral fellow at the Minneapolis VA healthcare system. Recover's mission is to maximize veteran participation in important lifelong roles and activities through development, evaluation, and clinical translation. Within Recover, we work with veterans with amputations and veterans with spinal cord injuries and disorders, or SCID. Our group has created novel rehabilitation interventions and technologies, some of which are here at DMD, and one that will be discussed later in this session. My goal as a researcher within Recover is to provide meaningful and impactful engagement of veterans in sport and physical activity, understanding goals and motives, increasing access and decreasing barriers to participation in adaptive sport may be the first step to increase physical activity levels in veterans. This is essential as physical activity is a critical component to achieving and maintaining one's overall health. The purpose of today's talk is to provide an overview of literature on effects of adaptive sports on quality of life of persons with disabilities, as well as perceived needs for improvement from the literature. First, I'm going to have you all participate. So please raise your hand if you know what the recommended weekly physical activity guidelines are. Okay, good, okay. How about, how many of you know that they exist but may not know what they are? Okay, some more people. The World Health Organization, or WHO, and Centers for Disease Control, or CDC, recommend 150 minutes of moderate intensity activity, 75 minutes of vigorous intensity activity, and a combination of moderate and vigorous intensity activity per week. And this is for all adults, including those living with chronic conditions or disabilities. So this could look like going for a brisk walk for 30 minutes, 5 days a week, or going for a jog for 25 minutes, 3 days a week. Other aerobic activities include bicycling, jumping rope, and swimming. In addition to aerobic activity, the CDC recommends muscle strengthening activities at least 2 days per week, and balance activities for older adults. So this could include lifting weights, using elastic bands, or body weight for resistance. For individuals with SCI, the Exercise and Sports Science Australia recommends including flexibility training at least 2 days per week, and they recommend focusing on the shoulder area. So now I want you to think to yourself, do you meet these guidelines? If you don't, you're not alone. Worldwide, approximately 1/3 of adults do not meet the WHO's recommended level of physical activity. In the US, this percentage is lower. According to the CDC, a little over half of US adults do not meet the physical activity guidelines for aerobic activity, and over 3/4 do not meet aerobic and muscle strengthening guidelines. And these are striking numbers because approximately 110,000 deaths per year could be prevented if US adults aged 40 years and older increase their physical activity levels by as little as 10 minutes per day. So why does not meeting current physical activity levels matter? Well, participation in physical activity and meeting recommended guidelines can decrease all-cause mortality, prevent cardiovascular disease such as hypertension, heart failure, and type 2 diabetes. It can strengthen muscles and bones, improve sleep, help maintain a healthy weight, help prevent falls among older adults, prevent cognitive decline, and reduce symptoms of depression and anxiety. So not only is it beneficial to physical and mental health, but there is an economic burden of physical inactivity. According to the WHO's Global Status Report on Physical Activity in 2022, almost 500 million new cases of preventable, non-communicable diseases will occur between 2020 and 2030. If there are no changes in physical activity levels, physical inactivity will cost healthcare systems approximately $27 billion, with the largest economic costs to occur among high-income countries due to treating illnesses related to physical inactivity. So how do we become more active? Well, if you're currently not active, a gradual increase in physical activity and talking with a healthcare provider about which activities may be best for you would be the first step. Otherwise, activities to become more active would be going for a walk after work or on the weekends, joining a gym and working with an exercise professional, or participating in recreational activities such as sport. However, to participate in sport, some individuals need specialized equipment or adapted rules, which brings us to the topic of adaptive sports. The term adaptive sports describes a sport that has either been adapted specifically or created specifically for persons with a disability. Compared to persons without disability, adults with disability are more likely to have obesity, report chronic conditions, and be physically inactive. Specifically, they're 1.5 times less likely to engage in leisure physical activity. Individuals participating in adaptive sport receive all the same physical benefits of physical activity that I had mentioned earlier, such as improving physical function to make day-to-day activities easier and decreasing risk of comorbid conditions. Along with benefits to physical health, individuals participating in adaptive sports programs have reported increased outcomes related to quality of life, self-esteem, self-efficacy, sense of belonging, and social relationships, especially among teammates, coaches, and mentors. Previous studies have also reported participation in an adaptive sport program has shown to increase involvement in the community and increase employment. So what sustains participation in adaptive sports? Researchers have explored facilitators to participation in an adaptive sports program, and they reported that sustained participation is associated with personal and environmental factors. For example, social connections, personal beliefs around improved fitness and health, and interest in new experiences and improved skill were all beneficial for engaging in adaptive sport. One study also reported that reduced travel distance was associated with sustained participation, as it may have reduced the barrier to receiving assistance from family or friends. Additional barriers to participation include fear of injury or pain, lack of or cost of transportation, and financial barriers due to the cost of equipment or access to facilities. Also, one study reported that individuals had a difficult time finding information on existing adaptive sports programs. The extent to which participation in adaptive sport is sustained and if the benefits are maintained with continued participation warrants more research. If there's anything I hope you take away from today, it's that few people meet recommended levels of physical activity. Physical activity may be achieved through participation in adaptive sports, which may provide benefits to physical, mental, and social health. Yet there is more we can do. Through innovation and design, we as researchers can optimize devices to provide more affordable and accessible equipment for participation in adaptive sports. In addition, we can ensure that adaptive sports programs get the support they deserve by highlighting and advertising existing programs. Within the VA, our veterans have the opportunity to participate in adaptive sports, and my colleague, Dr. Czeck, will discuss more on that next. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Dr. Alex Czeck, who's a board-certified physiatrist and sports medicine physician who serves as a medical director of PM&R Sports Medicine and deputy chief of PM&R at the Minneapolis VA healthcare system. Take it away.
All right, good afternoon. Thank you for letting me participate with you today. So thank you, Dr. Czeck, for the segue. So today I'll be talking to you about aligning veteran-oriented care, adaptive design, and outcomes. Otherwise, as I prefer to call it, AVOCADO. Because it's kind of that unique fruit that is very pleasant and you can't quite describe it if someone hasn't had it. All right, so as far as disclosures, the topics discussed today are my personal interpretations and do not necessarily reflect that of the Department of Veterans Affairs. If you like what you see in the presentation, you could find more about the VA Adaptive Sports and Arts through that website right there. My objectives for today are, I really want to give you an overview of our National Veteran Sports programs and special events. And I want to discuss the intersectionality of event planning, medical care, and research. Because if they all don't align, we don't get that growth that we're looking for. The VA has been a leader in adaptive sports for the past 40 years. So this year, we're going on the 42nd participation, or 44th of the National Veterans Wheelchair Games. We're leading into the 39th event of the Golden Age Games. So we've been around for quite a while. We have 6 different events, 5 of which are athletic-based, and then the 6th, which is performing arts. So what we're really trying to do is we're trying to promote opportunity for veterans with all different interests to be able to participate and engage in these activities, because as Dr. Czeck so well displayed, there's a lot of benefits to being physically active, and these are outlets to help our veterans achieve that. This table on this slide depicts the National Veteran Sports Program's primary inclusion criteria. So every event has a different criteria to it, and if you're able to kind of look down the list, you're able to see that it's anything from age-related to loss of limb to neurologic disorders to other degenerative processes, as well as mental health disorders. So we are capturing a wide spectrum of veterans who could participate in that, because as we said, we're really trying to promote that whole health and holistic care of our veterans. When you consider adaptive sports, they're as wide and ranging as your imagination. In the Golden Age Games, here's a selection of a few of the events that we host. So you're able to see that they're competing in feats of accuracy, of strength, of cardiovascular fitness, and also in team-oriented, as pickleball and a couple of other sports are team-based. What we hear often from the veterans is they really like to focus on the camaraderie that they get from these events. But we know there's so much more to it. If you have not been able to be a part of any of these events in the past, I cordially welcome you to join us in Minneapolis this summer for our 44th annual National Veterans Wheelchair Games, which is the world's largest annual wheelchair sporting event. And so that's happening between July 17th to the 22nd in downtown Minneapolis. When we're talking about sports in general, we always know that there's some risk associated with it. And that could be a deterrent for some people to participate. But we don't know what we don't know. Concussion has been in the headlines for the past 2 decades. You've probably seen it and heard about chronic traumatic encephalopathy with the NFL and the NHL and all the ongoing proceedings related to that. But what we don't hear about is that related to our adaptive sports. If you were to search concussion, and I did this search on April 9th, you're going to get about 19,000 or 20,000 hits. If you add one more search criteria to it, including wheelchair, you're going to see that drastically reduces down to 19. So you got about a 1 in 1,000 ratio of your able-bodied athletes competing in sport compared to your adaptive athlete. We see that there's this challenge, and we are accepting it. If you look down below, you can see the authors highlighted in the bottom right corner. So those are individuals who work with our VA. So Dr. Lee, the senior author there, he is the medical director of our National Veterans Wheelchair Games, and he and his team are actively trying to address this issue. When we look at concussion for our senior athletes, we also see a similar story. So if you add the term geriatric to concussion, we get 142 hits. If you add veteran athlete or senior athlete, there's absolutely no results. So really, we're kind of at the starting line when it comes to trying to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our veterans and able to propel this sport forward with them. At the Golden Age Games, we've taken an evidence-based approach in order to try to make sure we are providing the best and the most individualized care possible to our athletes. So for every athlete who's coming through our event, we're doing concussion baseline testing. This is essential because if you have been a part of any healthcare system for athletes, if you've used a concussion assessment tool, it is not standardized for an adaptive athlete. Their needs and their function are too wide-ranging to be inclusive of those tests that are currently available. So realizing that, we are trying to create our own normative data set for our athletes for these events. That way, when they come through, we know that we can detect a concussion reliably and accurately and make sure that we're not unnecessarily pulling people from competition because we know how much these events mean to them. So the 4 different tests that you're seeing here are examples of some of the ones that we use for the Golden Age Games. And this is where you really have to have buy-in with your event directors as well as your people all the way down who are helping you to organize, because if you can't get your director on board and you can't get your people who are helping you to do these tests, you're not going to be able to pull it off, and it's not going to be a sustainable thing. So last year in Salt Lake City, we did 822 baseline concussion evaluations. We did that in a day and a half. So imagine that is a full team working nonstop to accomplish that. So you have to make sure your tests are going to be timely, meaning that they're going to be brief. You have to make sure that they're functionally relevant for your athlete population. And then you have to make sure that you have the space and equipment needed to do these examinations. And then lastly, you need to pivot. You need to make sure that you're able to take your lessons learned and move forward. And I think our drop stick test is a great example of that, as some of the students who are helping to perform it realize that some of the athletes who are wheelchair users trying to perform this test weren't really able to grasp it as quickly as they would like to, or able to do it as reliably And so we're actually working with our engineer team on how to do a modified drop stick test so we can capture that information on that group so that we have, again, something reliable to look at when we're doing these evaluations. So in general, again, I think we are kind of at the starting line. Even though adaptive sports has been around for a long time, the first Paralympics was held in Rome in like 1965. We are still we're coming out of the starting blocks with regards to creating evidence-based practices. And it takes a whole team contributing to this. It takes people on the ground to tell us, hey, here's a problem with this test. I think we could do better. And then working together to find sometimes complicated solutions. In conferences like this, you're always seeing the latest and greatest and most elaborate tools, but sometimes it really can be as simple as modifying a stick in order to meet the needs of your patient. This is just an example of some of the sports at the National Veterans Golden Age Games, again, in action. I really do hope you take me up on my offer to join us this summer in the wheelchair games, and I look forward to answering your questions as we go along. And next up, Dr. Luft.
Okay, thanks a lot. Next speaker is Dr. John Loft, who's the Director of the Motion Analysis Laboratories and Clinic and the Associate Director of Recover. And Dr. Loft's research currently focuses on adaptive design for wheelchairs and adaptive sports equipment. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hansen. Thank you all for coming today. My name is Dr. John Loft, and today we're going to talk about optimizing adaptive row seating technology, or a toast to adaptive rowing. And yes, Alex and I spent an exorbitant amount of time trying to come up with how we can combine avocado and toast together. So before I get started, I and others from Recover are inventors of some of the products that are being presented. I have no financial disclosures. And last but not least, the topics discussed are my personal interpretations and do not necessarily reflect that of the Department of Veterans Affairs. I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge all of our funding sources, not just for me, but for all of our investigators and personnel at the Minneapolis VA and within Recover. Without all of these people supporting research, we would not be able to exist. So thank you to all of them. So I want to give a little bit of a background on Recover, our center. So as Dr. Hansen said, we are from Recover, which stands for Rehabilitation Engineering Center for Optimizing Veteran Engagement and Reintegration. And our mission is to maximize veteran participation in important lifelong roles and activities through the development and evaluation and clinical translation of practical rehabilitation interventions and technologies. And we do this through a bunch of different ways, and we have a very large team, but our primary focus is on two different areas, on amputation rehabilitation, as well as spinal cord injury and disorders. And we have a couple cross-cutting themes across both of those that include pain, discomfort from secondary complications, and aging with a disability. Now, these are very big topics, or broad topics for a talk like this at the moment, but it's not just one individual person that's all working on this together. As Alex alluded to, it takes an entire team of a lot of different people with a lot of different diverse backgrounds, with a lot of different perspectives in order to be able to identify where problems exist. And then the other part of that is, once you've identified the problem, is identifying the team that has the necessary pieces to put all the different things together. And so the story that I'm going to tell you today is about our adaptive rowing program and how we started from a spark to an idea to now a large team. And then Dr. Lombardo, after me, is going to talk about actually putting this into practice, which we're excited about. So our adaptive rowing project started, or optimizing oars is what we call it, is building on a passion from one of our now doctor, used to be a medical student, to give you kind of an idea how long this has taken. So she was a second year, I believe. And she was a rower at the University of Minnesota and participated as a rowing coach in a local community group. And a veteran with multiple sclerosis was participating in this adaptive rowing program. But one day, this veteran decided, or didn't show up. And upon further follow-up, Dr. Swans discovered that the person was still passionate about rowing and wanted to participate in those events, but the technology no longer existed for them to get a beneficial workout. And as like Maddie or Dr. Czeck said at the beginning of our presentation, a lot of people aren't hitting these national or these guidelines for physical activity. And there's a person who wants to get to those levels, and the technology isn't allowing them to get there. So we thought that this was something that we should be addressing. And one of the things that like stands out from this is if you take a look at the pictures off to the sides here, you can see that in front, the little gray thing, if you've ever been gone to a gym or you've seen an indoor rowing device, that's the thing that you sit on. It allows you to slide back and forth as you're doing your exercise. That little seat or the piece of plywood that's sitting there allows this exercise to be full body. It uses your arms, it uses your legs, it uses your core, it uses your entire cardiovascular system. It's a really great workout. If you haven't tried it, I invite you to go and try it when the talk is done as well. The adaptive technology for people who want to participate in rowing, though, is that seat that you can see behind there. I believe that one is a WindTech. And the WindTechs are bolted to that slide. So you can position the person who wants to do adaptive rowing in the right position. You can give them all the support that they need to make sure that they don't fall out. And you can get them the right length so that they're able to do the exercise. But they're not able to engage their legs. And so for our veteran with MS, a large part of like what they were excited about with this exercise, along with the community and all the other things that come along with it, was being able to use their legs throughout this exercise. So our medical student, Dr. Swans, came to us, myself and Dr. Czeck, back in 2019. Is in when this started, and it was like a hallway conversation. I think I was walking through the hall, and Alex grabbed me. He's like, "Hey, listen to this." I was like, "Oh, I think we can make a box." And that's where we started from there, was with a simple box. But that simple box allowed us to go and evaluate a couple things. So like I said, this veteran, again, that we're trying to help who has MS, we want them to engage their lower limbs. And so we went out and made something, and then we went and saw, hey, does this giving what we're expecting to have happen? So if we allow to have more movement, would you expect to see more power that's coming through the legs? And as you can see from our preliminary data, again, Dr. Swans is a former collegiate rower. She does really well on the full legs and arms, and she's the one who did all of this, keeping the pacing the same. And you see that our proposed solution is somewhere in the middle. So that gave us great hope that this is a great idea, and obviously it will be funded the first time. So we put together our obvious solution, and we sent it off to go and get evaluated. And in that time, the program officer called me, or he messaged me on Teams, and he goes, "Hey John, do you know about this other center? The APT Center, or Advanced Platform Technology Center?" I was like, "I've never heard of them." He's like, "They're doing very similar stuff. You should reach out to them." And so Dr. Lombardo and I started talking around 2020, and we got an opportunity to work together with them on their VA spread that was also looking at adaptive rowing. And we were able to grow our team based, again, on this spark of trying to help veterans and being able to provide access to an exercise that they didn't currently have access to. And what they allowed us to do was to join their team to spread this rowing device that you see on the screen here to the Minneapolis VA for our veterans to also be able to get some access to rowing as an exercise. This particular seat that we're showing here is no longer on the market. It's a paddle sport. And we worked with Lisa's group with their stimulation studies to try to figure out what's the best stimulation pattern for doing rowing and getting veterans to participate. But I know that that's what she's talking about next, so I won't step on that. But what we started from this with our rowing team is we started to grow and have lunch together, have done some team meetings, and start to build hey, we have this project that we're interested in as well. Would you like to come and join us? And maybe together we can put together an even better proposal based on their experience of working with this group and our passionate experience as well. Another thing that's very unique to our center is that we have our veteran engagement and caregiver panel. And we've been able to then take our devices and these ideas and then vet them through other veterans. So we have this one veteran who has this, wants to participate with MS. It's very important to address that, but it's one veteran. So we're wanting to also go out and see, is there something else that we're missing? Is there something else that would make it that you wanted to take home? Is there a different perspective that we should put into place? And so through conversations with people who we want to participate in these devices, who want to be active, who want to be able to participate were able to get some really great feedback. And from that feedback, we were able to put together a really great proposal that we're still waiting to get funding, hopefully find out in a couple weeks. And so we were able, and from there, our group continues like to grow. And there's a bunch of people here. There's many more that I didn't have pictures for, but like it only takes one like passing hallway to like spark a big idea and be able to go and grab other people to come and join. And luckily, Colin, who's in the audience and is here in the middle, and you saw him rowing, is also a collegiate rower. So between his experience and Dr. Swans' experience coaching and participating, and Lisa's team like dealing with Eastham and like actually having a rowing program that they're putting veterans through, and Dr. Sank and Maddie and a bunch of others, like we were able to put together a really great team. And I would like to pass it on to my teammate, Dr. Lombardo, to give you an idea of how to actually implement this in real life. And so I will raise my avocado toast to all of you and say thank you, and hopefully you guys have some good questions we can answer later. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Okay, last but not least, Lisa Lombardo is a research physical therapist and principal investigator at the Lewis Stokes Cleveland VA Medical Center. Lisa received her Bachelor of Science degree from Ohio State University, 1994. We won't hold that against her. She's a graduate of Slippery Rock University's Master of PT program in 1997. Take it away, Lisa.
So thanks, John, for the introduction. And I've been working, as John said, with the Minneapolis team for about 4 years now, and we're really excited about where this will hopefully take us. So what I'm going to talk to you today about is adapted rowing and using electrical stimulation to help facilitate the rowing. And again, I do not have any financial disclosures. I will talk about some products, but I have no ties to any of them. They just happen to be what we're currently using for our program. So what motivates me? As a physical therapist, I'm really motivated by getting people outdoors, getting them active, living a healthy lifestyle, and just being able to participate in activities that they enjoy doing. So in our center at the APT Center, we use neural stimulation for various activities. And this is basically just the use of electrical current to excite peripheral nerves and cause muscles to contract. So we're really just using this as a way to get muscles to contract that would otherwise be paralyzed and not able to be used. This can be administered either via surface stimulation or with implanted technology. I'm not going to discuss the implanted technology, but that is what we do a lot at the APT Center. And we use this technology for activities like standing, stepping, to improve trunk control and seated stability, and then also for exercise. So we really started this program back in 2015, and it started with cycling. So we wanted to get individuals with paralysis cycling, and then recently we've kind of transitioned to rowing. And the motivation behind adding rowing to our existing exercise program was really because it's as John mentioned, it's a full body workout. We can incorporate the upper extremities, the lower extremities, the trunk. We can get the whole body engaged and really maximize that cardiovascular response. One of the main goals when we started this was to really achieve the proper rowing technique. We have watched other individuals row with stimulation, and we wanted to make sure that they were rowing the way a neurotypical individual would row. And then our final motivation is to possibly get someone rowing in the water. So when you look at what we're doing, we've taken a commercially available Concept 2 rowing machine, and we've put an adapted back end, which John mentioned, this is no longer available. And we developed through some VA funding, a clinician-friendly application. This allows us to adjust the stimulation parameters and also to set the thresholds for the stimulation timing. And I'll go into a little bit more about how this rowing machine works, but What was really exciting is when we first tried it, the feedback we were getting is that it's the best exercise they've been able to have since their injury. So how does it work? So what we did is we took this string potentiometer, which is right here on the rowing machine, and it's a string potentiometer and a pod cable that goes to the handle of the rowing machine. And when the rowing machine handle is pulled, that will detect where the handle is and automatically coordinate the contractions of their paralyzed legs in combination with their arm movements. So this string potentiometer will send a wireless signal to our stimulator, and we can stimulate those muscles. We can do this, again, both with our implanted stimulation or surface stimulation. With the application, it's very easy to use. You can set up any stim parameters you want, so you can adjust the amplitude, the pulse width, and you can stimulate any 8 muscles that you choose to do. You can also adjust the frequency of the stimulation. We also set the stimulation timing. So we can set the threshold for the catch, the drive, the finish, and then the arms away. So we can do all of the different phases of the rowing cycle. And then we also have built into the app different interval training and endurance training. So we can set intervals where they will, row for a couple minutes and then take a break, or they can just go continuously. We also added coaching features because timing the rowing can be very challenging when you're first learning how to row. And I know when I first learned to row and still am not always that great at it, coordinating the timing with your arms and legs can be a challenge. So this will either give you pictures that would show you whether you're supposed to be using your legs or arms, or it'll actually give you voice commands and tell you what you're supposed to be doing at the various phases of the rowing cycle. So if you look at this participant rowing, you can see his form is not what we would call good rowing form. And then if you look at our stimulated rowing, she's rowing with much better form and her timing is much better. So we've done training with rowing and having them come to our lab 2 times a week. This particular results were after 15 sessions of rowing, and you can see the blue is baseline, and you can see very short, fatigued very quickly, and then by the end of those 15 sessions, this individual was able to row for over 60 minutes continuously. And you can see a drastic change in their rowing distance. And we also took strength measurements of their quadriceps, and this is stimulated contractions. So we measured the strength of their left leg and right leg. And again, you can see some nice changes there. So some other things that we added into our program is the role of virtual reality. So after a spinal cord injury, you kind of lose this central command, this descending signal that can help to activate motor and cardiovascular responses during exercise. So when we typically exercise, we show an increase in heart rate, increase in cardiac output, increase in muscle contractions, and increase in blood pressure. But after a spinal cord injury, this is blocked because of the injury. So our goal with virtual reality was to, first of all, increase the enjoyment and engagement in the exercise, and then to involve central drive and their volitional effort, and also help to promote a more appropriate sympathetic response during exercise. So as you can see, this is just a game that we developed in our lab, and you're rowing and you're supposed to stay away from the piranha. As you're rowing, if you maintain a good pace, you will catch fish in your boat. And if you start to slow down, then the fish will catch up with the fish that you catch. So it's a way of, playing a game while you're exercising. And we found that individuals enjoyed this and actually were more motivated to continue rowing. These are just some preliminary results for individuals with the VR rowing. And you can see in two different subjects, the blue is the VR trials and the red is the no VR, and you can see some nice increases in their heart rate. What's also interesting to mention is that when they were doing this rowing, their overall power that they produced while they were exercising was essentially the same for both conditions. So even though they weren't producing more power, their heart rate was going up higher. And we believe that that was because of the VR, that they were engaged in the game and it was helping to increase their heart rate. So now we wanted to take a look at making this rowing a little more realistic and actually talk about our final goal, which was to get on the water. So we purchased a bio rower, which if any of you have not tried it, it's a pretty cool rowing erg. You can adjust the oar handles, you can adjust the spread of the oars, you can adjust the height of the oars, the foot position, and you can also adjust how much it will tilt side to side. So this really mimics more realistic to rowing on the water. You can do sculling or sweeping, so you can use the two handles or the one handle. And we just recently also modified our bio rower so that we could do the same type of rowing that we were doing on the Concept 2 and have that signal sent. So with this, what we did is we took an arc magnet and it's sending, as you move the oars, the arc magnet will also move and send a signal. And then the signal is then sent to Bluetooth to the stimulator, and it will help to coordinate the timing of the stimulation based on where the oars are as you're rowing. And you can see here, this individual rowing on the rower with surface stimulation. So as she pulls the arms of the oars, the stimulation is automatically timed. You can see that it moves underneath her. So again, it mimics being in the water. And we also have participated in a regatta, a local regatta here in Cleveland. And surprisingly, there is a huge rowing community in Cleveland, but unfortunately, there is no para-rowing program. So these individuals, if you wanted to row on the Cuyahoga in Cleveland, it's not an option currently. And what we saw from the community is that they were very impressed by the form of our individual rowing, and they just couldn't believe that we were doing that all artificially with stimulation. So we've since partnered with the Western Reserve Rowing Association, and we are preparing to, hopefully this summer, it will happen. We will get someone in the water. Our plan initially is to get them on the water without stimulation, and then hopefully next year we would add what we call e-sculling. So we do have two different shells. So we have a single and a double, and we are preparing to take on that challenge this summer. So thank you for having me. And I guess if there are any questions, we could probably do that for the whole group.
All right. Thank you so much to all of our speakers. This was amazing. So now we can open it up to questions. Does anyone have any questions for any of our speakers? Yeah.
Hello. Thank you for all the presentations. I'm curious, do the algorithms that control the automated timing of the stimulations need to take into account different body types of different participants? For example, if someone might have lower or shorter or longer trunk or torso lengths?
So with that application, we can set different thresholds. So we set the threshold at the beginning at the catch position. So it takes into account for different body, different leg lengths. And it won't trigger that stimulation until they get all the way back to the finished position. And they actually have to pull their arms all the way back to their chest and then release them and do arms away before it will trigger the flexors to come up. So it does account for that.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. And actually, I have a question for Lisa and probably to other speakers. So this morning we have a section on wearable devices like sensors. How do you think the wearable sensor can help adaptive sports? And which type of sensor may need it? Thank you.
From a medical perspective, I see the next step of using wearables for the athletes is to monitor, to look for things like boosting or autonomic dysreflexia, which could be life-threatening. So it really helps us to make sure that they're doing well and have an idea of whether or not their performance is based upon their training versus eliciting an unfair advantage.
Great presentation. I was just wondering, are they tracking long-term outcomes of all these veteran games? Because like, oh my gosh, to see that it's like the 39th year and the 40th year of this, it'd be amazing to harness that to kind of justify these moving forward.
So this is my second year as the medical director for the Golden Age Games, and we do not have a injury like surveillance system. That's like my request. That's on my to-do list. But if you look at like the Olympics and Paralympics, they didn't have an injury surveillance system until like 2 games ago, and they're still kind of modifying it to try to smooth it out. And so right now, I'm working with some of our leaders in adaptive sport across the world to try to see if they had to reassess the injury surveillance system, how would they modify it so that we could try to implement that new and modified version.
I was going to say, even to look at outcomes for like remaining engaged in fitness would be amazing, or like satisfaction, that type of thing.
Absolutely. We've had people where they just refuse to quit. And so you kind of have to talk to them about like how to safeguard them from themselves in some situations, and knowing that next year is still a great time to participate. So I think it's really going to give us an idea of how to better prepare for the events, and also how to better prepare the athletes leading into the events.
Good afternoon. I'm Kimberly Gustafson from the University of Minnesota here, and my question is for Lisa. You mentioned that you've worked with participants both with implanted stimulation and with surface stimulation. I'm wondering if you've noticed any differences between those two methods, maybe one being more suited to rowing, or getting any patient feedback on how the experience is with rowing?
Yeah, I think, well, 2 things. First of all, the ease of the implanted system obviously is very beneficial for the participants. They can literally get on the rowing machine and they have to do nothing. Their system is ready to go. So there's 0 setup that's involved with the implanted system. Putting the surface electrodes on can be time consuming because you need to make sure that you're getting good muscle contractions to be able to perform on the rowing machine. With that being said, also those stimulated responses are far superior with an implanted system. You get stronger, more consistent responses with the implanted stim. It's much more targeted because you're making direct contact with those nerves that will contract the muscles.
Hey Lisa, this is Andy Hansen. Have you used trunk stimulation during rowing as well?
Yes, we have. And that's more with our implanted individuals because they have more channels of stimulation. So when we developed the tablet application, we took that into consideration so that we could add in that extra phase during the rowing instead of keeping somebody strapped tightly to the backrest. So the individual you saw rowing was with surface stim, and we only have 8 channels of surface stim, so we could not stimulate her trunk.
I have a question for the entire panel and for anyone who wants to take it. One of the barriers mentioned to participation was the cost of adaptive equipment. The VA is very good about helping get those competitors into their chosen activities. Is there a lot of publication out there about how a prospective competitor who may or may not be a veteran can access resources to get that adaptive equipment for them?
Honestly, it's state dependent. So if you were looking at like Oregon and you wanted to go on a trip there with a group of individuals who had adaptive needs, within their tourism board, they're actually making these kind of activities accessible and making sure that people can rent that special equipment, and it's just like next level, right? In other places like Minnesota, we have stakeholders who are able to work with us at the VA to make sure that people have that accessible. But for the average everyday person, usually that's going to come through grant funding and them kind of making it more of a local program. So it's really going to be driven by the local stakeholders as well as maybe more of the more global government organization of how you're trying to promote health and yeah, I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. Great presentation. You're all doing very meaningful work, so it's great to see you guys serving the communities you do. I guess one thing I'm curious about, because I'm interested in virtual reality myself, I've noticed you guys made that game, and you talked about how it increased engagement with your population. I guess you were talking about how the game was supposed to help drive or promote correct posture and also like correct form. I guess I'm wondering, were you using any other type of tracking for like the joints of each individual's knees, elbows with like infrared, like electromagnetic tracking systems to really like get a deep dive on like how your system is being used by your, I guess, patients, I don't know if that's the right term, to ensure that they're like getting the maximal output and like comfortability from your systems?
We have not taken it to that level. We are going to be, hopefully in the near future, kind of evaluating some different seating systems and looking more at the kinematics of the rowing and doing a more motion analysis with that. So that's hopefully going to be coming in the future.
Yeah, it's Andy Hansen again. Lisa, with the game too, can somebody be going too fast or too hard? So like if you kind of put an upper limit on speed too, or for this it's like faster is better? Just go as fast as you can.
Yeah, that's a good question. And that situation has not come up. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to get anybody to row that fast, but I guess when that day comes, then we'll have to. I think that's easy enough to add to the game, but we haven't faced anybody that was rowing too fast.
I have a question. The VR game was very interesting. Is that used only for the study, or do you anticipate making that available for people when they're exercising outside of the study?
Well, we are looking at spreading that technology to, for sure, other VA centers, and some of our participants actually have headsets that they're taking home. Again, I think we're just in the preliminary stages of looking at the game and how it can impact. And I think we have to do a little bit more research to see, exactly like what are we doing with that game and how is it impacting. Is it making them exercise more times per week or exercise at a higher intensity? So that's kind of our goal with that, is to continue with that research and then spread the technology.
Awesome. Yeah, it was really neat.
Hi, is this on? Hi, Kimberly Gustafson again with another question for Lisa. I noticed you plotted how muscles strength improves over time with rowing and duration. I'm wondering what you've done to look into fatigue of the muscles and what's good fatigue and where is bad fatigue reached, and when to stop these trials, or when someone's session should be done because they're too fatigued, and if the muscles stop responding.
Yeah, so that's actually part of what motivated us to start doing the cycling, which I know we're talking about rowing here, but it does address the fatigue issue. Because we know that there's commercially available FES bikes, and individuals get on those bikes and they ride for 60 minutes. But we've had individuals that told us that they could pedal those FES bikes for 60 minutes. And then they came to our lab and they rode our bike, which does not have a motor. So the commercially available bikes, they have motors. And if your muscles are fatigued, it will keep your legs cycling, even if you're fatigued. Our bike does not have a motor. And what we saw was that these individuals that said they could ride a bike for 60 minutes, when they got on our bike, they were pedaling for 2 minutes and they were fatigued. So that was the motivation, is that we didn't want to stimulate muscles that were already fatigued. So we started doing these training protocols on the bike, and we just gradually increased that time. So it's very obvious when their muscles are fatigued because they don't move. So the rowing slows down and you end up, it's time to take a break because you can tell that you're not getting good muscle contractions. We also did on the Biodex fatigue index test, which I did not show that plot, but we did look at that, and they did have improved fatigue index, which means that those muscles were less fatigable over time.
Amazing, thank you.
So that's a great question.
I've got a question for Lisa about the VR. I also have a big interest in VR. Have you used the Stim with the VR system?
Yes, with the rowing.
Are they all connected via Bluetooth?
Yes.
Okay, and there's no problem with the Bluetooth connections going to all the different devices and okay.
No, so we actually put the handle of the Oculus headset right on the handset or the handle of the rowing machine, and then the VR game knows where that handle is, and so it was all synced together.
Oh, I see. So the controllers were then connected on the handle. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's interesting.
Yeah, and we do the same thing with biking as well.
I've got a question for the panel. So I really love the engineering that was involved here to put sensors and collect data and basically drive the stims at the precise times. Are these devices essentially tied to the equipment? And is there any, what are your thoughts about using something like accelerometers tied to the patient?
Yeah, that's another great question. And like using something like IMUs on the limb segments for biking or rowing, I think that's something that needs to be looked into, because then you could use it on any bike or any rowing machine and not just our particular one. But we have not currently done that.
The nice thing about this particular setup is because the technology is on the device, you get to see, and they're coming back to the same device, especially in the development stages, we get to see what's most important. So what Lisa's been talking about a lot is how their endurance has improved, or them wanting to keep rowing. And so right now that's the primary goal, is to try to see can we make these devices accessible to people who don't currently have access to these exercise machines, and be able to promote this is a good exercise in these ways. I think that your question is more of longer term, beyond where we are right now, where that information is valuable for being able to say that's a good quality stroke, however you define that. But it's dependent on the participant who's using it and what is quality to that person. So if you have somebody who has a brand new injury and they just want to have something to do, and this is the thing that they're excited about, we're not as concerned about that they have a great quality rowing stroke and will be a para-athlete at that moment, right? That might be what their goal is and come later. And in that case, those technologies might be helpful. But as Lisa said, we have things that are in the cooker that we can't talk about that is looking more at that, where is the body position when these different forces are being applied and when the stimulation is kicking on versus kicking off. And so there's a lot of exciting stuff yet to come, just not today. Good question.
Any additional questions? I have one more I'll ask. I think you kind of got to it with your last response, but how do you balance trying to achieve perfect form versus your other goals of just time on the erg? Is perfect form part of trying to get someone out onto the water, or is there a good enough form that you can achieve exercise goals with?
Yeah, I mean, I think they kind of go hand in hand. I think that when you're achieving that better form, you're engaging those lower extremity muscles at the right time. What we found is that if you don't do the right form, so if somebody's pulling with their arms too early in that rowing cycle when they should be relying on their legs, then they're essentially fighting the stimulation. And so they're trying to pull with their arms, but they're pulling with their arms pulls them back forward and doesn't allow their legs to extend. So I think that by working on the form, we also allowed the maximum benefit of that exercise. So in this case, it worked out to go hand in hand. I do understand what you're saying. Like sometimes you should give up the perfect form for the exercise intensity, but I think in this particular case, they worked well together.
Yeah, that's great.
I think also that's also why we have like a diverse team. So like Dr. Swans, Colin, and others that like are experienced rowers and are rowing coaches, like guiding along the way. So like I said, like we have engineers, we have PTs, we have rowing coaches, we have a bunch of like a diversity on our team with different types of perspectives to try to like capture like when is the form, when should we be focused on form versus when should we worry about like the function of the device versus like what type of data do we want off of this device and how are we going to use that? Like all of those are really great questions and they all have their place, but at the moment it is trying to get people in it and just seeing like, are they excited about it? And then like adding those pieces like as we go. And like you saw in our presentation, like for us, this project started in 2019 and then Lisa and all of us have been working together for the past 4 years. And it's incremental progress followed by like big bursts of like, here's a new technology, here's a new way that we can implement it, here's the new thing. It's really been really exciting and look forward to 4 more years and beyond.
Yeah, as someone who has rowed, perfecting form is so difficult. So having the approval of the rowing community in Cleveland on the form that your participants were able to, your team was able to produce is really awesome. It speaks to the how far you've come on this project. So it's really, really cool. Any additional questions? All right, if not, I wanted to thank the audience for being so engaged with all the questions and to thank our speakers again. So let's give our speakers a round of applause for 4 awesome talks. And I think there's probably there's a little bit of time left, so maybe the speakers will be able to engage one-on-one with you all if you have any individual questions, but thank you again for being here and have a great rest of your conference.